All right. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. いよいよですね。メールで話すのは何年、なんかメール以外で話すのは何年ぶりやろ。
6年ぶりじゃない多分、
ね
2016年に、前、神戸に住んでた
そ
んじゃない
う、その時かなって思って。
神戸駅、三宮駅じゃなくて、神戸駅
うん。
の隣に住んでいた時に家に泊まったっていうのが最後だったと思
そう。で、それ以来は日本来たっけ？
来てる。もう来てる。行ってる。
うん。
最後日本に行ったのは2020年の1月。
うん。
コロナが、大阪で発症した当時と、武漢からの観光客で、大阪に感染した時だったね。
よかった。いいね。
3年前、最後日本に行ったの。
Crazy. So today we're going to start off with some basic questions and we're going to move into the juicy stuff. We're going to talk about how best to learn Japanese at home, input versus output, AJATT, practical and applicable study methods. And then towards the end, we'll move, we're talking Japanese for a little bit like we did just now, gave you a little sneak peek, right? And after that, we'll have some open time for Q&A from chat. So I'm going to push you because that's what the good interviewer does. Thank you, marketing, all my marketing experience. Thank you. You taught me how to interview well. So I will push you and end you sometimes, but just know I still love you, okay? All right, so why don't you start off with your name, age, and what do you do?
So my name is David, last name redacted.
Yes.
I turned 32 4 days ago, I think.
That's good.
And I am a corporate lawyer at a large law firm in Sydney, Australia.
Awesome. And do you ever use Japanese in your current job?
A little bit. Not often. So it's more what the Japanese would say, prasahofa. Like, I'll do work for some of our very large Japanese clients, and I'll visit their office, and I'll speak to some of the directors or the people there in Japanese a little bit. But ultimately, like all the work needs to be done in English, given that we're in Australia. So there is kind of a practical reality that when we're talking about work, we talk in English, and then I'll just have a bit of a chat to them in Japanese outside that.
Gotcha. And then, so when you think of me, what do you think of? What sort of glorious memories just come rushing back and make you extremely happy?
I remember hanging out at the lounge, which was our sort of social area at the university we went to, and sitting with some of our mutual Japanese friends and chatting, or hanging out with some of our other exchange friends.
Awesome, thank you.
Could you pop on your video on Discord? Because at the moment I'm just looking at
sure.
A little button of your face.
Sure, no problem. My bad. Good point. Now you feel all alone, I'm sure. You're like, where's JD?
Yeah, it feels like I'm just looking at my own head. I don't want to be looking at my own head.
Can you see that now?
Yeah,
right.
I can see it now.
The stream is okay. All right. Let me just check chat real quick. Double camera action. Oh, okay. Double camera. Oh, everything's fine, right? Our university? No. In Japan. Moving on.
Yeah.
So how many years have you been learning Japanese? The first year being the first class or attempt you ever had at actually learning Japanese.
I think first proper class would have been in high school. So year 9, I probably would have been about 15.
Okay.
And I did it for maybe a year and a half. Then after that, I was supposed to do it for the last 2 years of high school, but our teacher, it kind of got beyond her Japanese ability, and she said she couldn't teach us anymore. So I still took Japanese at the high school certificate. In Australia, that's like our leaving exams. I still took Japanese, but I had to teach myself. There was like a distance education program where they would give you the materials and you would just have to study it. And then
Gotcha.
I took the exam. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it was effectively, I was self-study from the time I was about 16,
Okay.
15,
Okay. That
16.
early. Okay. And then what is the first memory you have of anything Japanese? Culture, TV, actor. Yeah.
My dad was a judo instructor. So
What?
I mean, I would have been exposed to Japanese stuff, before, like even before my first memories.
Right.
Like
Right. Right.
I have a memory of being in kindergarten during the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, and everyone had to draw like countries' flags and color them
I
in.
remember that.
and
Yeah.
and I remember strongly wanting to do the Japanese flag. It could just be because my
So
because my coloring in skills weren't very good, and you only had to grab a red crayon and go like that. It could have been because of that, but I do remember strongly wanting to do Japan.
that's funny. I did the Kenyan flag and got my mom to help me, who is a graphic design artist, which is like one of the most complicated.
It's much
Uh,
more complicated.
how did you start studying? How did you start studying, learning?
Well, it's sort of not an easy answer. As I was thinking about yesterday, in that
Mm,
the first Japanese I learned was through judo when I did judo as a child. So I learned how to count from 1 to 10. I learned the names of specific techniques. Um, that was the first Japanese I learned. And then
wow.
more some kind of in a structured way would be when I got to high school in
Okay.
when I was about 14, 15.
Okay. Any thoughts on textbooks?
Thoughts on textbooks?
Good, bad, neutral, depends.
Is there any specific textbooks or like
Anything in
textbooks in
general. Like, do
general?
you think it could be beneficial for someone to have a textbook? Let's say let's focus.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I think particularly when you're starting out, I think it would help to just be able to read that textbook to have the context of how grammar works.
Yeah. 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 I agree. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So like, what do you feel? Let's like say pre Japan. What worked for you? What worked for you? Do you feel in terms of studying, self study?
The things that worked most for me was number one was just mass input. So I would watch a copious amount of Japanese television, and I would read so much. Like when I was before I went, at one point I would have been going through like one Japanese novel a week. I'm just sitting reading on the train. I'd read so much. Um, and then outside of mass input, I used Anki
Mm-hmm.
to memorize words and sentence structures. And then the first thing would have been remembering the kanji, haisik,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
mnemonics. It's mnemonics, isn't it?
Pneumonics.
Mnemonics.
Pneumonics.
Yeah, mnemonic.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah, I
mnemonics.
remember. I always remember you
That
told me
function.
about high sick.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite way of learning or enjoying Japanese out of all those? Like, yeah,
De-
you binged, but
definitely just the mass input, watching TV. It was super fun. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
But what about that?
it's just easy.
Yeah, but what about like, didn't it feel like I don't understand anything? So this is kind of boring or frustrating or what?
At the start, it did a little bit. The first couple of months, but honestly, I don't think that period lasted very long for me. Maybe a couple of months, if that, maybe
Right.
2, 3 months. But that being said, I did have that background of learning Japanese a little bit in high school. So I wasn't starting from zero. I was starting from a point where I was definitely not conversational. Like I couldn't
Of
understand
course, of
a
course.
regular
Yeah.
conversation. Um, so kind of somewhere in the middle.
Okay. What didn't work? I remember one that's kind of funny when you talked about, now it's like kind of popular on the internet. It's like sleeping and listening to Japanese. But is there anything like that?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, sleeping listening to Japanese definitely didn't work for me.
Yeah.
I found that it just disturbed my sleep. I tried it for a long time and it just didn't work. Even now, like if I leave a podcast or a music or something on and I fall asleep, it'll inevitably wake me up in
Yeah.
half an hour, and I'll just be
That's true.
annoyed and like throw my phone to the other end of the room.
Yeah. Anything else that didn't work? Or you were like, I shouldn't have done that. That was, it was okay. Or
at one point I used, you know, those websites where you like write stuff in your target language and then a native speaker comes and like corrects it.
yeah. Like
Can't remember the name of the website.
Quora.
It's like
Yeah.
that wasn't the website, but it was kind of like that.
Yeah.
I tried that, but I think the problem with that is the main thing being you don't have enough input to be producing quality output. So what you're writing is probably kind of weird, and the people are going to have to fundamentally change everything you're writing because it's weird and it doesn't make sense. And also, I think native speakers' language, I've noticed this in myself probably too, is without knowing, sometimes you tell people who are trying to learn your language how to do things and how to say things and what's right and what's wrong.
Right.
And it's not necessarily how you do it yourself. You're just saying, oh,
Mm.
this is the correct way to do it.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily true.
Yeah. I think there needs to be some kind of, I don't know about threshold, but some kind of in between where like you allow mistakes, but you also correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
That's what I do. Yeah. So what did you do after that? So you binged for how, let's just like, and then what did you do after that? And then when did you start to see results?
So I started the process of like binging a lot of stuff, and then my goal was to pass N1. From the time I started binging, passing N1 was like, it was a little over 12 months. Not much more. I think I probably started binging sort of like July or August in the previous year, and I got N1 like in November, December the next year.
Wow.
But I mean, I don't know if there was like a change in process. Like I just did mass input and used Anki.
Okay.
And learnt it, and then I got N1, and then eventually, like a year after I got N1, I went on exchange.
Right.
So when I went on exchange, I didn't really have the time to study Japanese like I was in Australia because I was busy, actually having a social life. So no significant change in the way I learned really.
Okay. How did you know you were getting better? And then like, was there anything specific you did to determine that?
I would notice that I would understand shows better. Like say, and I'd start watching something like, I don't know whether you ever watch Ame Talk.
I remember you recommended it to me. Yeah.
And Ame Talk, like it is all conversation. Like that is a whole show. There's no like, it's not about like watching pretty images or like recreations of events like some other Japanese TV show. Like it's all conversation. And when I realized, I'm just watching the show and I'm not needing to look up words, like I just watch it like I would be watching a show in English, I realized that I could understand most stuff. It was much harder in terms of output because I didn't have an outlet for my output. But I went to Japan sort of maybe twice in between that time of starting learning a lot and then actually go on exchange. I think I went twice, maybe three times.
Were you alone?
Every time I went
through like all of your studies, and like if you were you alone, like kind of by yourself studying?
Basically, yeah. So I took some Japanese classes at university because if I didn't take it, I wasn't allowed to go on exchange.
Right. Okay, so do you think that helped with your motivation then? Because like, how did you not lose motivation? Just all alone, kind of failing a lot, right? You're like, I don't, kind of that mix between either failing but also succeeding.
I think the learning process was the motivation itself because it became a hobby. Like when it's a hobby rather than something that you're approaching, like, I don't know, like something that you have to do to reach a goal. Like no one sort of I don't know, like takes up sailing or something as a hobby. But maybe that's a really bougie hobby. But anyway, no one takes up sailing like, oh, I hate this and I'm failing all the time. But I'm gonna do the America's Cup. And that's the goal. And once I've won the America's Cup, then I'll be happy.
Right.
Then you just do it because you enjoy it. And that's how I treated it. That it was my hobby. It was just what I did. And of course you're failing like you would in sport, right? Like if you do sport as a hobby, you're going to be failing constantly. You just kind of, you just pick yourself up and just keep doing it.
Exactly.
I fail every day, man. Life's full failures.
Right. So one of my friends said, fail faster. Fail faster.
Fail faster.
Yeah.
Good idea.
He was Australian. Or he is Australian.
He still is.
For now. So do you think, this is a big question, do you think you could have done it if you were working full time?
I think it would have been really difficult. I think it would have just maybe prolonged the timeline.
Okay.
But it also depends on the job you're doing. So I know of people who can just sit and do their job and like have TV running. Even like people that I work with, I know people who will be tapping away, drafting contracts and stuff and be watching TV all day and they're fine. I can't do that. My brain doesn't work like that. I have to turn it off. I can listen to music, but that's all. I can't have speech while I'm trying to read and think. So it depends on your job. It certainly requires a lot of time.
Right.
So that would make it quite difficult.
What advice would you give to somebody who loves learning Japanese but also has a family or works full time?
To not kind of beat yourself up about having to balance those things. And also, I mean, it depends. For most people, learning Japanese is not the be all and end all. It's okay. Like if you don't get that little bit better,
amen,
by spending an extra half an hour watching a TV show or whatever, you have family responsibilities and work responsibilities that ultimately take precedent.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, and it's just like you said, in the end, it's your hobby, right? Like in what world should your hobby prioritize family or work? You know, there's sometimes it bleeds sometimes. It bleeds into those things. And I would, at least personally, I'd say if it's family, like try and have fun with Japanese with your family.
You might be able to incorporate it.
Yeah, teach them ohayo, and have some fun with it. Was that a foghorn? That's like a very...
My side, I was probably a plane, quite near the fly parts.
Gotcha. Let's see. Is there any, kind of switching categories for a little bit, study methods, is there anything people should definitely avoid or be wary of?
I think any of those courses that say that they have the one true method of learning, and if you don't do it this way, then you'll be bad or whatever. I think that's kind of popped up a lot more recently with the internet. I think that's just it's just not true.
Yeah.
There's no single way of learning a language. I would avoid that like the plague. And yeah.
Okay. That's kind of a tougher question. So, okay, I guess speaking of
I can
that,
go with tough questions. That's okay.
I mean, like longer.
Okay, maybe we'll put longer ones to the.
Yeah. Well, we'll never get it. So, what would you do differently, or recommend to someone who's starting now or who's on their way?
I would say, so for someone starting now, I would just say that there are so many resources on the internet, the majority of which are completely free. Like you can get very good at Japanese, you can learn without spending much money at all. If you don't want to, if you want to, there's thing you can pay a tutor, you can get textbooks, you can do whatever.
You can get a lesson with Japanese language mentor. I mean, anything.
Absolutely, yeah. But there are so many resources that just at your fingertips. I mean, including if the internet wasn't there, well, you wouldn't be able to find Japanese language mentor.
Exactly.
Make full use of it. And there are so many places you can find free books to read, like Alzora Bunko. You can read like the old Akutagawa Ryunosuke books.
That's kind of yeah, I have seen
that's really handy.
Works, yeah,
and you can watch recent Japanese from dubious Chinese websites.
You too? Okay, I've never talked.
Oh yeah, of course. Everything was from dubious Chinese websites, or Russian, Chinese or Russian, sometimes Korean, but usually Chinese or Russian.
Maybe it was you who sent it to me. Yeah, I watched Mecha Ike on this. Like it's gone now, but I just constantly. Cool. So let's see. So AJATT is a term that's thrown around a lot these days. All Japanese, all the time, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of the debate of input versus output, maybe. Does that sound right to you? So this is an interesting question I haven't heard talked about, because you became fluent in Japanese before going to Japan. Now, how do you feel your Japanese was before, and then more so, like what changed? Like what did you notice about your own Japanese after you got to Japan and you were like, oh, I suck, or oh, I'm doing it? Like what happened when you finally got to Japan and where you were like using it every day?
Okay. So that question has a few parts. To start with the old Japanese all the time part, like I definitely was really into that, and that was my policy, to just consume all the media that I consumed. I made it Japanese. That was my policy for a good 18 months, 2 years. In terms of my Japanese before I went to Japan and after I went to Japan, I think I knew that I could understand most things and I could read pretty much anything before I went on exchange, like for an extended period in Japan. But I didn't really know how my output would be, because I never had opportunities to speak Japanese. I didn't know any Japanese people in Australia, so I didn't have anyone to talk to. So when I got there, I think I was pretty surprised that I could speak, and I could, it wasn't particularly difficult to just speak Japanese. And how did it change?
Yeah, like you got there.
I think, my speaking would have definitely improved over the year that I spent on exchange. Um, it's hard to kind of gauge it myself because I didn't go from zero to sort of conversational. I went from already conversational to more conversational. So I
Okay.
think it's much harder to see the progress.
Okay.
Probably my Japanese friends would have been able to describe that better,
Right. Right.
but it's quite hard for me
Mm.
to gauge that one. Um, and do you want to know how it's changed after the time in Japan?
No,
Or
no, that's fine. That's fine.
okay,
I think I have something later about that.
okay.
So did you feel like it was relatively easy to become fluent in Japanese?
Easy is kind of a tough word. It was not. It was very time consuming. It's a matter of time. Like so much time. Um, and you just have to be sort of dedicated. Sounds a bit like um, I don't know, like you're not saving lives here. Like
Yeah.
not dedicated, but you have to be persistent. You just have to keep going with it because if you don't, and if you're not persistent and consistent, you get better. And I think that's most things you have to learn.
So
You just have to keep with it. Yeah.
persistent, consistent. Okay. Listening, we'll say
Yeah.
comprehension, speaking, kanji. Which do you think was the hardest?
To
Or
learn.
yeah, or took the longest to kind of gain that skill in fluency?
Mm, I think speaking
Interesting.
because I had no
You had
I
no
had no
outlet.
outlet for it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I'd say reading was the easiest for me because I just read so much. It just came to me naturally. Listening was a little harder. Um, but I find even in English, like sometimes what people are saying to me comes in one ear and out the other.
Mm-hmm.
So that is maybe a problem with my brain rather than my language skills. But I actually understanding what people are saying in Japanese took longer than being able to read something and fully comprehend it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, was there a point in your journey where you thought like, wow, I'm actually fluent in Japanese now?
Probably when I arrived in Japan on exchange,
It's really
and
interesting.
I don't know whether you did it, but for us, they made us do a placement exam.
Yep, 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 yep.
And I did this placement exam, and then out of I don't know, it was like 120, 150 exchange students, and they picked five of us to put us in a separate room to take like
The second one.
an advanced placement exam,
Yeah.
and it was me, two Taiwanese kids, and no, and one Korean guy. Yeah, it was only four of us. Yeah,
Yeah.
two Taiwanese kids and a Korean guy. Um, and then from there, I was put in like the academic Japanese program in the university, and it was just the four of us again. And at that point, I realized, oh, I guess it worked. I guess I got pretty good because now the university is not really making me study Japanese, really. Like they're making
Mm,
me do academic Japanese, but that was compulsory. Like either you had to do Japanese learning classes or
that's
you
right. That's right.
did academic Japanese.
Yeah, it would have been nice just to not do anything at all, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Are-
also, I don't know, that I landed and I'd speak to people and I could speak to them and they would understand me. And I realized, oh, I guess I can speak this language now. That's weird.
yeah. So, I didn't, since it didn't come up, I used the word fluent, but you probably feel the same way. It's a very
Yeah, it's pretty.
ambiguous word, so to say.
Yeah.
So how do you personally define fluency?
Oh,
This is a good one.
that's really difficult.
Yes.
Well, because I'm like talking about my Japanese now, I don't have near the proficiency that I did when I was using it constantly. Whereas my reading and listening fluency
Mm,
is probably pretty much the same.
mm,
That never really has atrophied that much. It's just been my output,
right.
because I don't really have an outlet for it.
Yeah.
Um, so fluency is really hard. I mean, I always aimed for being a functional adult in Japanese society. Like if I could go to the bank and have them, change my account and give me a bank card, and I could go to the shiakusho and get the
Mm,
Zaidu card,
okay.
and
So
like,
how practic?
or
How?
within
Yeah.
yeah, or within sort of the first 2 weeks I was in Japan, I did all this stuff by myself, like just me. And I went to the bank and I went and I got a phone plan and I got a phone. And I went to the shiakusho. And it was very like it was a thing of pride because I wanted to show that I could do this. I'm an adult here. I'm a big boy now.
Yeah.
And
It's
I can
funny
talk
because
I can talk to the
yeah.
lady at the AU shop. She can give me a phone 'cause she understands me.
It's funny because I did the same thing and got arrested.
Yes, well, that's true. Yes, that's a different matter entirely.
It's fun, and that was also a thing of pride. I'm like, I can do this.
Yeah,
No, it
yeah.
wasn't pride, it was it. But so just real quick, we're gonna move next. We're gonna talk about input and output. But just for anyone watching who doesn't know this channel, I'm JD. This is David. My business is Japanese language mentor. So I do private lessons, relocation support. My goal is to help anyone who watches to guide you in the right direction on your Japanese journey. And David helped me in this way when I was learning Japanese, and it 100% just had a huge impact on my Japanese today. So if you're interested in taking private lessons, or if you're moving to Japan and need some assistance, doing those things he was talking about, like going to the city office, opening a bank account, it's not easy. So if you need some help, I'm here for you. So output versus input. So you said you studied at school for a little while.
Yeah.
If you had to like give a percentage or a ratio, input, output, before you went to Japan, what do you think that ratio
Before I
was?
went to Japan, I
Yeah.
mean, it'd probably be like 100 to 1.
Wow.
In terms of time, easy. I just didn't spend any time speaking Japanese really, or writing it, unless like in the classes I had to take at university, like sometimes we'd have speaking practice. And I did make a couple of Japanese friends at university, but then they soon went back to Japan. Um, and even then, like a lot of the time, they came to Australia to learn English, so we'd speak English most of the time anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably an accurate reflection. Very little output,
Yeah,
just all input, just constantly.
that was the feeling that I got. Now, do you think that this is a one size fits all approach?
No, I don't think so. It worked for me, but a lot of that's because of circumstances, because I didn't really have an opportunity to do output. I suppose I could have made more Japanese friends somehow, or something like that.
True, true.
Um, but sort of had to just do mass input to learn. And for some people, I mean, I've seen other people learn and improve much more quickly through um, spending time with Japanese people and learning that way, or I don't know, like writing things out and having their teacher or their tutor correct them. That helps some people a lot.
Okay, yeah, true, true. Good. Do you think it's somewhat personality based, whether that works or not? Whether you're, like I get personality, or like how some people study in other ways better than others or learn,
Yeah.
right? Do you think it's something like that?
I think you have to be pretty introverted to do what I did.
That was
Just
yeah.
being realistic. Yeah.
That was my
You have to
perspective
be,
too. Yeah.
yes, you have to be pretty introverted to
I
spend,
yeah.
you know, tens of thousands of hours
Yeah.
just watching Japanese TV and reading novels on the train.
So this is kind of a recent thing. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts. I've kind of noticed that people who think, you know how the people who think without speaking aloud.
Yeah.
So I found that I think people who don't speak aloud are kind of better at the input side, but then people who just like blah 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 their thoughts are kind of
Yeah.
more naturally better at the output side.
I think that's, yeah, I'm definitely the former.
And I'm the latter. So that's how I
Yeah.
noticed. I was like, oh, I gotta help in a different way. So
Yeah. People learn in different ways. That's
Mhm.
absolutely true.
if someone doesn't maybe learn well in the way you did, is it not really the introvert, or maybe like I'm not loving this? What do you think would be a good way for them to study at home, or is there a good way?
I mean, you just try different methods. If you don't like doing the mass input, maybe you do try a textbook. Um, Ultimately, though, I think to learn listening, you do have to do input. I don't really know how you can get around that.
Mm,
That's pretty hard. And reading too. Like if you're not reading stuff, how are you gonna learn to read stuff?
right. So then kind of an idea of like, or the what you got to do, like we were saying, is like find something that's fun. And
Yeah.
I say kind of like ride the wave until it ends, you know.
Yeah. You
Uh,
can't you can't learn how to ride a bicycle without actually riding a bicycle. Not possible.
all right. So, in your expert lawyer opinion, because this is going on the record, all right, what do you
Right.
think is the best way to maximize output at home?
Take full advantage of the dodgy Chinese and Russian websites on the internet. Though
Output.
there are a lot. Oh,
Yeah.
output. Oh, if I was doing it now,
Mm,
I probably would get either a tutor to speak to or make more effort to find maybe people on the internet, like language exchange.
hmm
You know, there's a lot of services like that.
Apps.
I yeah.
hmm
I'm not too up to date on
Sure.
what's
Yeah,
around.
I know. Yeah, I had to get up to date.
Um,
VR
yeah,
chat.
yeah. I've heard of VR chat.
I haven't done it
Maybe I
yet.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be for
Mm,
me. It's kind of weird. I don't
mm.
know if I want to talk to middle-aged men that are
Dress up
like
as
in
an
a
anime girl. Yeah.
little yeah. It's the anime girl in
Yeah.
the sailor uniform.
What about like recording yourself or like writing stories? You know, what about writing as output? Journals.
I think recording yourself can probably help. You can pick up the mistakes you're making and stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, Writing a journal probably a good idea, but you might want someone to correct it. I'm not sure whether it helps just like constantly writing out and then repeating mistakes.
Mm. Yeah, right.
Not sure.
That's the worry, right? Is if you're saying the wrong thing. But I guess you know
Yeah,
what? And then I think it's okay because I think anything is better than nothing. Yeah,
yeah,
because
yeah. I agree with that.
children make mistakes all the time, even up to like 5 years old. So I
Yeah,
think it's fine.
absolutely.
So then maximize input, kind of, you know, you think the shows. I was talking to a student yesterday or 2 days ago about how like comedy might be one of the best forms of input. So this is not
I
playing.
agree.
I never thought about it until we were doing it in a lesson, but when you think about it, comedians might be the masters of the language
Yeah,
more than
yeah. They are. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because you think of a high
Absolutely.
intellectual or something. Like yeah, they know stuff, but
Try.
they don't communicate like a doctor or a professor who's more of a writer than a teacher, right? That kind of
Yeah,
analogy. And so comedians have a they know how to say the most stuff in the most condensed way, the best stuff in the most condensed way, like the most
clever with words. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you recommended comedy to me way back when, and then like you recommend. So just so anybody can know, it's like he loved Ame Toku, which is like this conversation, and I was like, oh, this is how I get fluent. I tried it, I hated it. Just me, right? I was like, it's too much talking. It's like I need a little bit more than like, here's a chart of why Japan is failing right now. It wasn't for me. It was for David. And so it's like, just like he was saying, is like, you got to find stuff that suits you. So I kept searching. I asked people, and I found mecha iketeru, which was like just a godsend for me. I was like, this is so dumb and hilarious, and I love it. So, let's see. So I'll skip a couple questions, but I've cherished this crucial info from you forever. I even made a video on it a little bit. But when someone's learning via input, how should they go? Let's see if you remember what you told me 10 years ago. How should they go about memorizing and learning new words in input, like for input? Like, yeah.
Well, I would think if you're learning new words from input, are we watching TV here, or are we
sure? Let's just say we're watching a show or a drama or an anime, and you're watching. And you're like, how do I know which words I should memorize? Or should I just write them all down?
Oh boy. I probably was more wise about this stuff 10 years ago.
So I'll tell you what you said if you don't remember, but
yeah, tell me what
it was great advice, man. It was such great. I swear I've never heard anyone say this.
20-year-old David.
I think I asked something like, how do I know which ones are the right ones? Like, how do I know what's important? I feel like I'm writing, and you're like, don't write down all the words. And you said, you need to write down the important words. And I was like, how do I know which ones are important? And you say, either, I think you said this part, but it's like, either it's the ones that show up a lot, like, hey, it happened, they said it 4 times. Yeah. It's probably important. Even if it's an irrelevant, like, rikon. It's rikon shita. It's like, oh, they keep talking about this. To find out what the general content is. And then the second one was kind of crazy advice that is you said, whichever one you think is important. And so it's
good advice. I'm a smart guy.
You are a smart guy. And it's like, it's hard because you're like, wait, but how am I supposed to know? And it's like, you don't, but at least in like one of the videos I made, it was just like the point is, don't pause and stop and start and stop and start, because in the end you're actually not listening to Japanese, right? If you're starting, stopping, brain switch into English, right, do this, it's like you're not getting that constant flow, and I feel like that's a hindrance. Would you agree?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I agree. If you're constantly pausing it, it sort of defeats the point.
For Anki, just quickly, a big question people have if they do Anki is like, what the heck am I supposed to put in here? Kind of a similar question, but like, what did you said you used Anki all the time? I remember you recommended it to me. Yeah, individual words, grammar, like a sentence you saw?
I think sentences.
Okay.
That's what I put. So I still have an Anki deck. I've been very lazy about reviewing for a long time, but I still have it, and I still take down notes of things to put into it. But
do you have all your old ones?
No. So so I started using Anki probably about 2 years before I went on exchange, and then I put in sentences and with like words highlighted or bolded to show that this is why I put this sentence in. This is the focus of the sentence. And then I base my answers like whether I remembered well or not on my recall of that specific word.
Okay.
I did put in some individual words, but it's mostly kanji. So that was mostly for nouns. No, not kanji.
Interesting.
No, that was a separate thing. I had a separate kanji
deck.
hasi
Yeah,
deck,
that makes sense.
kanji deck. But for my sentence deck, I put in like nouns. So something like, I don't know why this is the first thing that comes to my head. I am disgusting, but Japanese word for gonorrhea is rimbyo.
Dimbyo. Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, you want the word rimbyo in a sentence? Like, you don't really need it in a sentence.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
for nouns, sometimes I just chuck it in there, particularly if it's a word like that with very low frequency.
Yes.
And it was like difficult for me to find a good sentence within it. I'd be like, stuff
Mm,
it. I don't need a sentence in this. Just put the word in. But it was mostly full sentences
yeah.
in there.
And
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it reminded me of like nobody is better, right? You know, nobody's better.
No.
I think I'll talk about that in a second, but the idea is like, I've always remembered something you definitely excel in is like your, I don't know, goiryoku is like your lexicon was just like always crazy. Maybe because of Anki, maybe just your brain.
I think maybe Anki really helped me.
Yeah, because I was I didn't know gonorrhea, and I did a medical translation job for 3 years. So, but if it doesn't come up, it doesn't come up, just like you said.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, in terms of the Anki, I had that deck. I got 10,000 cards in that deck at one point. Then
That's
I
insane.
went on exchange and I had more things to do. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't have the time to be reviewing all this. And it just piled up. I just completely deleted that deck.
Yeah.
I started a new one. And the new one that I started, I'm still using. So that's been a bit over 10 years.
Gotcha. So what was so there are a lot of people in chat who are Dogen fans. So this next question is actually really, really important. Okay. So are you Jozu?
Am I Jozu?
Yeah.
I definitely used to be Jozu. I mean, aren't we all Jozu?
Yes, we all are Jozu.
I think we all are Jozu.
Yes. What was your approach to, I'll just call it sounding Japanese? So I mean, as you were doing input, didn't you like mouth the words sometimes ever? Like, it was that I would consider that output as output too, right? You're just like, for example, nimbyo, naka katakuriko, like katakuriko.
I don't remember doing that. Maybe I did, but
Interesting.
I don't really remember doing it very much.
Maybe that's the process thing then.
Yeah, I never really spoke it out loud.
Interesting, because I constantly did that. Even when I input now, if I hear something, and it's like interesting or it sticks out, I definitely like just blah, 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 and just kind of pop it out a couple times. So did you ever study or learn about pitch accent?
No.
Okay.
No. So the only thing I knew about pitch accent was a very high level idea that word like ashi,
So
I knew about that. I think everyone learns about that.
Yeah, and that was the only thing I ever heard. Yeah.
Didn't know it existed in every word, kind of in a formal sense.
Yeah, me neither.
Like I could hear it. I knew it was there, but I thought that's just how you pronounce words.
Right. I wonder if it's like, like we talked about this, like neither of us are against Dogen or anything like that. Okay.
No.
Yeah. It's great that he's doing what he's doing. Yeah. He's hilarious. Yeah, he's funny. And so like as you're getting better and better, did you separate accent into categories? Like, did you notice certain things like intonation, accent? Like we said, pitch accent, maybe, I'm sure you kind of took a mental note maybe of like desu ka? Like it's going up, like, did you ever kind of have mental notes like that as you went on?
I think so. With the mass input, the more and more you hear the language spoken,
it becomes kind of,
you just learn it.
Yeah.
Automatically, I think, to some extent.
No,
and it's probably
agree.
not perfect from that.
Yes.
You won't have perfect pitch accent and all that.
And who cares?
I think you probably will.
Yeah.
But you'll be pretty good, I reckon.
Yeah, I agree. And like for anyone who's curious, like you don't need perfect pitch accent. I'll just say it's like, I mean, I didn't even know about it until let's just say 2 years ago. Didn't know of its existence,
Yeah.
and I'm sure David had the same experience. Many times,
Yeah.
people go, "Did you grow up in Japan? Like, how long have you lived here? Are you Japanese?"
Yeah.
Like these kind of things. Like sometimes it happens, and it's just like, nope,
Yeah.
just living.
Just living your life.
All right, so living at home versus living in Japan. Were you able? We already know that. So, you were able to speak Japanese before going to Japan. How would you rate? How good do you think you were on a scale of 1 to 7?
1 to 7.
Yes, that's the
interesting.
marketing scale. That's the marketing scale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think by the time I got there, probably like a strong 5, I guess.
I like that. And then,
And
go ahead.
I think while I was there, maybe the 5 got a little stronger. I think that my Japanese was best when I was actually working as a translator.
Yeah,
Then I might have been pushing a 6.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. I'd say before. I'll just say mine because it's interesting. I think before, was I able to speak Japanese before going to Japan? No. How good was I? Did I think I was like a 1, maybe a 0.5? Like I just thought, you know what? I thought I was like a 2, and then I got there and I was like, I'm like a -3. Like I know Jack.
Yeah.
Where you were able to understand. Nah, it's a little different. So you knew me when I was really bad. And I don't know for sure, but you got to see me get better as it was happening. What do you remember or recall about kind of witnessing my own Japanese journey?
I find it difficult to remember specifics, but I know that you weren't really conversational when you first got there, and we have a mutual Japanese friend who would have to sort of speak to you in English a lot of the time to get points across because you wouldn't be able to understand if he just spoke Japanese to you.
Yeah.
And then by the time you'd left, I think that was not necessary anymore. Like people could just speak to you in Japanese and you'd be able to understand and you'd be able to respond pretty well and you'd be able to get your point across. You definitely improved a lot. But you definitely had a strong motivation to learn. Like I think you wanted to make those social connections with people. That was your motivation, and you really worked to get better at the language to be able to do that. That was my perspective anyway. I don't know whether that's how you felt.
Yeah, no. It's like, I think it's like you were saying earlier. It's like, I bet my Japanese friends could have told me more about my Japanese. That's the way I feel. Is like, I remember stuff, but like, there's no outside perspective on yourself. So, no, I think you're right. But I totally forgot about the social connections. Like, I think that's more of like who I am. And it never was like I'm going to make social connections. It was just like, how do I like talk to people?
And making friends. Yeah.
Were you proud of me?
Yeah, very proud.
Thanks.
You're very Joseph.
Thank you. So who do you feel is better at Japanese on average? This is kind of a, whatever question. Foreigners who live abroad or foreigners who live in Japan?
I mean, it's such a hard question.
It's loaded.
Say, in Australia, there are so many people learning Japanese. I'm pretty sure it's still the most common language for kids to learn in high school. Probably the most common language at university as well. So there are a lot of people in Australia who know a little bit of Japanese. And maybe if you average them against your average foreigner in Japan, obviously they're not as good because they live in Australia and they're just like learning out of a textbook.
Right.
I think the average ability of foreigners in Japan can be pretty woeful at times. The average is not good. There are people who are amazing. There are people who are, many times better than you and I, many times better.
that are just mystery.
But
Like they don't, like nobody knows about them.
oh yeah, it's just like old like I mean I've met like middle-aged women who
Yeah.
worked in software translation in the 90s and then they just have like the perfect Japanese.
Yeah. And I think
It's like
that's
how are you this good? And it's a mystery.
I know. And I think that's so important is like part of the reason why I also wanted to get onto social media in the first place is like, it seemed like everybody, when I got on Twitch at the beginning, it was like everybody thought it was like it's either Dogen or Matt versus Japan. And like these are the only two guys, over exaggerated, but like these are the guys that did it. Therefore, they're the only ones who know how to do it.
Definitely not true.
And it's just like I knew me, I knew you, I knew Nathaniel. Like Dai is English, but I knew Dai. It's like I just think it's like a gross misinterpretation of how many people are actually like hyper fluent. I don't know else how to call it, but like the higher level of fluency. Do you know what I'm saying? Or would you not categorize it like that?
I mean, they definitely exist, but I mean, again, like I haven't spent an extended period in Japan since I was like 20 years old. So I don't have these wide social networks in Japan to meet these people.
Oh, for
So
sure, for
maybe I'm
sure. I
not
just
the
mean,
best person to
you
ask.
assume
Yeah,
that
from
they're
what I know. Yeah.
right. I mean, like there's some guy whose wife is Japanese, and he just works at an Eikaiwa school, and I get, he's fluent.
And he knows. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I think usually those guys are really bad. Usually.
I know. I know.
Usually those guys are really
Yeah,
bad. Sometimes
yeah.
they're good. Sometimes they're just like, oh, I quit my job as an investment banker in New York to move to the mountains with my wife, and now I teach English.
はい。じ
I'm
ゃ
really
あ、
good at Japanese.
ここからちょっと
Really
ち
nice.
ょっとだけ日本語で話そうと思いますけど、どうですか？
はい。
はい。
いいですよ。はい。
はい。じゃあ、まずは、お名前を教えてください。
デイビッドです。
何歳ですか、デイビッドさん。
今32歳。
そうですね。お仕事は
仕事は弁護士。
で、日本語を勉強、めちゃめちゃ飛びますけど、日本語を勉強するきっかけっていうのは何でしたか？
言ったように、ね、日本語を勉強するようになったきっかけは、お父さんが柔道の師範だったこと。だから5歳ぐらいの時から技の名前を覚えて、例えば出足払いとか背負い投げ、覚えて、で、まあ、会話はもちろんできなかったんだけど、まあ、1、2、3、4、4とか数えることを覚えて、で、その後、高校に入ったら、ちゃんと座って日本語で勉強するような授業を取りました。
いいですね。で、なんか、これまでの日本語のジャーニーっていうか、それを振り返って、なんか、こうすればよかったなとか、なんか後悔っていうのはありますか？
公開ではないんだけど、大学の時にもっと日本人の友達を作ればよかったと思います。
なるほどね、友達。
それは別に日本語に対する熱心っていうよりは、私自身の性格の問題だと思うんだけど、もっと友達を作ればよかったと思う。
そうね。
もっと友達を作れば会話する機会が増えたかもしれないし、今会って話す友達がいたかもしれない。
確かにな。で、まあ、その日本で出会った友達とかって、まあ、話したり、今でも話したりしますか？まあ、大は。
メールはするけど、実際に話すのはないですね。日本に行くときだけ。
そうね。そうで、まあ、ちょっとこの間教えてくれたんですけど、なんか、この日本語って、この3年間、過去3年間で、これってなんか、使って何回目ですか？その3、はい。
実際に話すのは多分5回目。3年間のうちの5回目だと思う。5回目か6回目。 まず日本人の友達いないし、オーストラリアにはね。
そう。
で、日本人の知り合いいないし、彼女も英語が母語で、英語、英語が基本会話が。仕事も全部英語。
うん。
だから日本語を使う機会がまずないで
そうで
すね。
すね。あのあ、これ面白い。これ一応最後の質問です。This is the last question, and then we'll get into the Q&A. Okay?
Alright,
As long as David has time. So, um,
absolutely.
母国語以外の言語、つまり日本語で、日本語を話せるようになったから、世界観が変わったと思いますか？
ああ、世界観が変わった。あのやっぱり考え方が変わると思う。
うんうん
外国語を勉
うん。う
強した
ん。
ら。例えば日本人のなんだろうね、日本の習慣とかを覚えて、で、これが正しいとかじゃないんだけど、
うん。
あの、日本人のやり方もあって、オーストラ
うん。
リア人とかアメリカ人のや
うん。
り方もあって、どっちが正しいっていうのは全くなくて、
そうそう。
違うだけっ
そうそうそ
ていうのを実感するようになる
う。うん。
と思います。
そう。本当にわかります。僕も、まあ日本、特に日本に行って住んで、特に住んだからかな。でも、
はい。
その言語学習を通しても、やはり、すごい世界観が変わると思いますよね。
うん、
いい意味でね。
そう、
うん。
もちろん、
はい。
賛成です。
ありがとうございました。Thank you so much.
ありがとうございます。
Yeah.
こちらこそ。
So, there's not too many. I don't know if people have been typing in the Discord. If anybody, let's see, is watching and wants to ask questions, we'll be doing it. Hold on. Sure, somebody could create an invite, but let's see. There's some in Discord. There you go. みんな違ってみんないい. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey, everybody. Thank you
everyone is
so
great.
much. Uh, just seeing. I'll just add this one. Maybe. Okay. So let's see. Uh, you actually should be able to see the questions in the Discord too. It says David interview
Okay.
Q&A if you want.
Oh, cool.
If
Yeah, I
you
will
if you
find
want
it.
to choose or something. If it's something
Uh,
we've already done, then
you go
I'll
ahead
okay.
because I'm very low tech and don't know
Okay.
how to use Discord.
So, how can you? This is from Shelby. How can you
Yep.
stop thinking in your native language and start thinking in Japanese? I think she's talking about the process, like, when does it happen? How to get to there?
I'm not sure I ever got to there. I think that's really difficult. Um, it's pretty hard to stop thinking in your native language. Maybe if you were completely immersed in that second language and you kind of flipped and you never used your native language very much, you would
確かに。
probably switch. But
Mm.
I don't know about you, JD.
うん。
But like obviously these days, probably you would speak Japanese more than you would speak English every day. I'm guessing,
I speak.
but
Yeah.
you're constantly surrounded by English, right? Like,
Yeah.
and your brain's gonna default, I think, to the
Mm.
place it's most comfortable.
Yeah.
But also, I wouldn't look at that as like you're failing or something. Like, I don't know
Absolutely.
if you're supposed
Absolutely.
to ever get to that point. Like,
Yeah.
as long as you're good at the second language, I don't think it really matters what language you think in.
Mm. Yeah. I think I have two things to say. Is I think it can, like, there's definitely, I would say, so I think that okay, coming from David's perspective now, that makes sense, is because you kind of just did input, 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 and then one day it was like, oh, I'm doing it. And for me, it was output then input. So I was just like constantly struggling. And like in Japan, I'm like just trying to figure this out. And I had to
Yeah.
do, like, if anybody does output before you have like this superior input brain, um, you really have to kind of, you do have to translate. You go English,
Mm.
Japanese, English, Japanese. Um,
Yeah.
but this happens all the time with my students. the way that it best works, and you might have not had too many of these moments, which is interesting. I don't know what else to call it. They're like brain moments, but it's like you will be trying to, like, I'll say something in Japanese. I'll be like, この間はどこに行ったんですか? I'll say like a basic question or a question, and then you can process it. Your brain processes it. You're like, hey, yeah, he's saying like the other day where went, and then so you get the input easy, and then you're like, I want to say I forgot my wallet, so I did, and then so your brain, you go like this, and you're like,
okay.
And so,
I see.
You know what I'm talking about? Brain moments.
I think maybe I misunderstood the question.
Okay.
I sort of took that as about changing your inner monologue to the second language. Okay. In terms of like someone speaking to you just coming out.
Yeah. I think the idea.
I guess that's same with my speaking. That like when I arrived in Japan on exchange, like people would just talk to me, and I was just able to respond to them in Japanese without having to like think, oh, he said that. Oh, well, I want to say this. How do I say that? No, I was just able to do it.
Yeah. You said internal monologue. That's interesting. There's, again, this type of two ends of thought processing is you're probably an internal thought processor. Thought processor. Sounds like a computer chip. You don't speak your words that you're thinking. I do. So it's funny because I probably don't process thoughts in Japanese. That I can really think of. If everyone is speaking Japanese and it's all Japanese, I think I do.
Yeah. I think that's the same for me. Like if you're with Japanese people all the time and it's just like, it is just kind of the straight from your brain to the mouth that will come out in Japanese. Like, oh, ow, that hurt, or oh man, it's cold. Like that kind of stuff will come out in Japanese. When say if you're sitting alone on the train thinking about, oh, what am I going to cook for dinner tonight? You're probably not going to think, you're probably not going to be doing that in your brain. It's probably going to be in your native language. That's what I meant.
Yeah. It's funny because I wonder if this differs, because I do verbalize stuff like that. Like I'm like, hey, 今日何作ろうかな? And I think
if you're doing that on the train, I think you might get in trouble.
大丈夫。So yeah, I won't spend more time on that. But hopefully that answers your question, Shelby. Zenny said, you said you like to read one novel a week, but you still used Anki. How necessary do you think Anki was at the time?
I think it was pretty important. It's you do need some level of memorization. It's definitely not crucial. Like I think you could just do constant input, and you see a new word in a book, you look it up and you go, oh, that's what that means. And then you see it again the next week, and then you remember, and that memory process kind of cements itself. But in effect, Anki's just doing that in a more deliberate way. So it's like, why not just use Anki?
Interesting.
You really don't have to. And I think not everyone likes to do it. And it's kind of annoying, and you have to put in the cards, and you have to do the reviews, and it is a hassle, but I think it's really effective, personally.
Interesting. And I think a big point, I want to re-emphasize the fact that you said you mostly did sentences.
Mostly,
yes.
Yeah. Some single nouns or weird things like, do you know what shimenawa is?
Sure.
Shimenawa is the rope that is like under the awnings of shrines, something like that.
See, that's what I mean. Like your lexicon. You were always like this. Like I forget what it was. I keep trying when you're talking about the kaizoku oni ore wa naru, and you were like, oh, and that's called in Japanese grammar. It's a very specific term called blah 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 blah. And I'm like, so I've always loved that about you, though. I've always loved that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. What was to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like those complicated
Shimenawa.
words
Uh,
where it's really hard to find them in a sentence. Like,
Come
when
on,
are you going to
man.
use shimenawa in a sentence? You're not.
Mm,
Which, I mean, raises a separate question of why I learned that word. But anyway,
yes.
I think in that case, you don't need a full sentence for it. Just chuck in the word. And do you need to learn those words? So my policy is still this. If I know the word in English, I'm embarrassed if I don't know it in Japanese.
Yeah.
That's my policy.
Mm.
If I look it up, like say if it's a medical term, and I don't know it in English, then I don't feel bad about not knowing it in Japanese.
Interesting.
Like, I'm not a doctor.
Okay. Because I really love this parallel. That, like the way you talked about me making social connections, that to you is what social connections and like getting it out was to me. So I could care less. I am totally fine with being embarrassed. Like I'll say everything wrong. Not now, but back then it's just like I don't care. Like there's this guy Takuya. He was so much better at me than in English than I was at Japanese, and he would be like blah 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 like in English, and I'd just be like, "Boku wa yatta, yatta."
Yeah.
You know, and then it's just like probably so painful for them, but I was like, I have no choice. Like, so it's very interesting. So for you, it was like that was your I don't know, your anchor, or your kind of like I don't want to budge on this, and that helped your motivation. Moshi moshi.
So,
Okay. Hold on, it's cutting in a little. All right, I think we're good now.
Cool. Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
I think it gave a bit of direction, so I didn't like go off and start learning all this weird stuff that I'd never learned. You do need a bit of direction, something to keep you on the rails.
You gotta guide you in the right direction. David, you were that person for me. You really were. I mean it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk a little bit about that. I mean, I don't remember much. I don't remember giving you a lot of this advice. I mean, it's so long ago.
I mean, I've talked about it. We'll get to the Q&A stuff too. Let's see. How did you practice? And if not,
we can maybe talk about that later. But
and if not, I can always maybe send it to you later.
Cover Q&A.
Yeah. But so here's my perspective of how you helped me. And it's, I mean, I literally based my own business off of it, which is crazy. Now that I think about it, it's because you were my Japanese language mentor. And I just remember I came to Japan. First, I knew I sucked. There was a lot of bias against me because I was American. I'm not even joking. Especially from
what do you mean from the Europeans?
Yes. See, right?
Yeah.
I swear.
I don't think maybe like the Australians. I don't think so. I mean, there wasn't many Australians. It'd be from the Europeans.
Yeah, like you. I didn't talk to the other. It was Harry, and then there's you, and Harry was fine. You were fine.
A couple of others. Yeah.
But yeah, lots of prejudice from the Europeans, like you suck, and then like Americans are pieces of crap, which I don't really like America right now, but different
So I had the prejudice of these Americans are coming over here and they all suck at Japanese. I didn't have like, oh, Americans, blah, 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 nothing like that. It was just like, oh, these people suck so bad.
Yeah. So for me, it was like I get there, I'm kind of feeling like crap because of the like, oh, you suck. I'm like, yeah, I know I suck, but I'm like, I'm gonna try. Like, and I think honestly, no one really kind of believed that I could do it. Almost like makes me emotional for a second, but like, I guess I haven't thought about this side for a while, but it was like I remember just getting there. I thought I was gonna get placed in level 3. I got there like you should do level 2. You could do level 3, but you should. I was like, the smart guy in me says I should do level 2 and cover all the bases. And And I really just remember people just being like, you suck, and not like directly, but just
Okay. I mean, everyone sucks when they get there.
yeah. And I just remember like not feeling confident that I could like no. I remember feeling like nobody believed in me. That I could actually do it. But nobody knew me either, right? We all just met each other for it's like been like 3 weeks. So like, who's JD? Like, you have no idea who I am. And I've always been the like, if I want it, I'm gonna get. It sounds horrible. I really something that I want to be able to do. Like, I always like really strive to do it, and so I feel like I felt like you took an interest in me.
Hmm.
I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
I think so. Well, I could see that you really want to learn. I think.
Mm.
So, yeah, and to give people context, it's in terms of like if I was your Japanese language mentor, it's not like I was sitting down with you and saying, this is how you do this. It was more just kind of high level advice, I think.
I think,
I'm guessing
yeah,
that's more what you got.
right. And I would call it like strategy. I think I think a big one. The thing that felt the nicest, I think, that I can remember is knowing that I had someone to go to when I had like the hard questions. When it's like, dude, I have been hearing, and I always remember this one, Yatsu. I went back in our old
Oh, yeah,
Facebook.
yeah.
I went back years.
Did you?
Yeah, and I made
Wow.
a video about Yatsu based on that. And I was like, dude, I don't get
It's a tough
Yatsu.
one.
What the heck is
Yeah.
it? And you're like, well, there's 3 different things of Yatsu. Like, it was like, this guy's an expert. Like, what the heck? And so it just felt so nice to actually have somebody that I could go to after, like, it wasn't just constant help me, help me, help me.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it
No,
was
you just like send me a message, be like, hey, what does this grammar mean? Or you'd be like, oh, how do I get better at this specific thing?
exactly. And that's what felt so good. And then, also just having like a long-term, this is more personality, I think, for me. It's like in the thumbnail there's my rival, not Harry was, but Nathaniel was my true rival.
Well,
I don't know if he ever told, if I ever told him that, but whatever. But I, not like rivals like I hate you, but
no.
it's spurred
Like
from
the
jealousy,
goal.
right? It's like, gosh,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just, the way he's be like, like the
yeah,
like,
yeah. It
I was
was
like, dang, like, that's cool. Like just the way that he was so confident, and like he could
he's
really
very confident.
fluent in the way that he would just talk to anybody, and I was like, I want that. And so like I started with Harry because Harry was like better than me. He's level 3, and I was just like, so I always had somebody that I was like chasing after. um and it was Harry who was close, and then I surpassed Harry, you know well, just in my own mind, right, we'll say.
Hmm.
And then I caught up to Nathaniel at one point, and I was like, yes, like I can like actually do this. I think there was one time I noticed a mistake that Nathaniel made, and I was just like, like he didn't even know. Like, how does he not know? And I was like, okay, so there's even more potential. Like, this isn't the
Yeah,
top. This isn't the top. I can keep going.
yeah.
Um
You can keep getting better.
yeah, and I think that's where it stopped, where it's just like, because at one point you just kind of get good, and that you don't really think about anything. You just keep absorbing, and it's just natural.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for you, like, you invited me to events like
Oh,
takoyaki
yeah, yeah.
party at Keita's Haruda,
Yeah.
right? And
Oh, yeah.
oops, yeah, but yeah. Um I'm sure it's okay. There's like not that many people, but
Yeah.
and there's what was I gonna say? The takoyaki, and then like him being my Nihongo partner, I think was also influential in getting to know you. And I do remember this one time that was very vivid. It was like I was really crappy, and you and I'll just say Kame, you and Kame were
Yeah.
talking.
The turtle.
The turtle. Yeah. We're talking just because it's rare, you know.
Yeah.
We're talking, and I just didn't understand anything. I couldn't pick up anything, and I was just like, "But you guys let me sit there and stand there and listen. Like you didn't like try to include me, which was better because I was like, eh." But it taught me how to like pick out, okay, there's no way I'm gonna process 100% of this conversation, so I should not try. So therefore, okay, what do I learn? Like, here's a great opportunity, and it was like, oh, David uses this or she uses that. So yeah, and I think just it was so nice to know that somebody cared about like my growth. You know, I didn't know how much, but it was just like, it's so like, I was like, like David wants me to get better. Like he wants me to get better,
Yeah, absolutely.
and he cares, and he's helping me, and he answers my hard questions. You know, and it's a role model. It's a true senpai, you know?
Thanks, man. That
Yeah.
feels good. I mean, I hoped I gave that to some people. Like, just, even if it's just being able to envision that you can get better. Like, you will, like, it's possible. It's not like
Yes.
no one who's a native English speaker can become fluent in Japanese. Like, of course you can. It's just, it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you says. Like, if you're working full time, you have the family. It just takes longer. It's a longer timeline. Longer timeline.
Yeah. But that's okay. You know,
Yeah.
everyone has different stresses, and I mean, it's like balancing a career and balancing a family. Like that's hard enough.
Yeah. Let's see. リーゼントさん。一応に英語で聞いてくれたけど、一応日本人なんで、ちょっと日本語で言おうかな。So, how is David's Japanese fluently level? それなんか、どのぐらい、自分がどのぐらいなんか、まあ、流暢だと思いますかって。
I mean, that's, I mean, the very different question of like how fluent was I sort of when I was using Japanese regularly, and how fluent am I now?
でも日本語、
two different.
日本語で。その、まあ一応、一応その、はっきり、リーゼントまだいる？ Are you still here, Reason? ちょっとどういう意味かなって、なんか、具体、大体はわかるけど、その具体的にどういう、なんか何を言おうとしてるのか、ちょっと、もうちょっと具体的に教えてくれる？おったらね。We'll go back to that. So when you used Anki often, how いいよ、今聞こえた？そのリーゼントの質問ちょっとだけ曖昧っていうかちょっと分からへんくってなんかこれ日本語で言い換えるとどういう意味？When you used Anki often, how did you do your reviews? And did you complete all reviews for that day? 20 reviews, 30. Did you stop after a certain amount of time, etc.?
I think at my peak, I was doing like hundreds of reviews a day, like 200 or something.
200?
Yeah, at the peak.
How long did that take you?
Yeah. Like an hour, I think. Like an hour or two.
And you enjoyed it. You loved it.
I don't know if I did. That's why I stopped doing it. It was too much.
It's too much.
It's too
right?
much.
It's too much.
It was too much.
Right?
It's too much.
And you probably didn't even retain that much, right? If you did, then I think you have okay. If you can do that, I think your brain is special in that way for sure. I mean, you remember Shimenawa, right?
Yeah, I do.
Right now,
I remember a lot of weird.
And this is a side question. Do you think, like, I remember words very vividly based on memory. I remember when I learned the English word opposite in first grade because my teacher, Miss Barry, said, she took me out of my chair and she goes, "You're doing the opposite of what everyone else is doing." And for some reason that stuck in my memory. So I have a picture. So do you think that adding pictures to Anki could benefit
Yeah. So I did put pictures under
Okay.
nouns like
しめ縄
like that. I
なる
would
ほどね
have
or gonorrhea right
yeah gonorrhea, just a nice close up picture from a medical textbook.
I just needed to
No,
remember
I think for that one I just had the word.
right yeah hopefully
Some gross stuff.
um what are some funny mistakes that you've made
Any
like
mistakes?
I think probably like
Ah,
if you know it, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I can think of one when I went on a short exchange to a Japanese university at some point, and I was in a Japanese class, and there was a Japanese student there, and we were talking about like differences in school uniforms and things.
Mm-mm-mm.
And I wanted to ask whether Japanese schoolgirls wore trousers to school. And I said, 女子高生はパンツ履きますか? And she was quite shocked.
yeah, 特に女子高生っていう言葉
Yeah,
でね
you probably you shouldn't be using you
Mm.
shouldn't be asking that.
yeah
That would inappropriate.
yeah that's a good one for me it was with my host mom and we were in the car and I had just learned this word burabura. Burabura suru is like to kind of like window shop or like to kind of walk around town just looking for something to do, just no real motive. But it's very similar to the word for horny. And so my host mom in the car, she's like, 今日何する? Like, what are you gonna do today? And I was like, ちょっとムラムラする. And and yeah so,
Pretty funny.
so she's like what are you gonna do today I was like I think I'll just get horny yeah so that was she goes eh and then I was like ah nandakke I was like yeah so yeah that was a good questionリーゼントさん、日常会話の中で日本語はどれくらい、話せますか？
もう日常の中では日本語を使う機会が全くないですね。オーストラリアに住んでますから。日本に行ったら大体何でも日本語で対応できる。例えばなんだろう、レストランの予約とか。そうだね。で、日常会話は友達と会ったら普通に話せますけども。最近もう使う機会がないので、やっぱり能力が鈍っているっていうのは実感しています。JD もわかると思うんだけど、10年前とか、もっと上手だったんだけど、今はそれほど使えないですよね、日本語。
そう。口の、筋肉
が慣れていないことと、脳が文を作成するに慣れている設定になってない。
その文章の構造とかね。
はい。
めっちゃわかる。そう。僕も2年間ぐらい過去にそういう時期があって、もうアメリカに住んでる感じで、でもうほとんどもうアウトプット、その日本語を喋る機会が全くなくて、メールぐらいはしてたけどたまに。でも、実際に話さないともう久しぶりに話したらあれなんかちょっと下が回らないみたいなそういう感じにはなるので、はい。それでどうですか答え的には。Last one from Purus. I noticed that I rarely remember words unless I've used or encountered them from actual experiences in Japan. Not being in Japan, or not being in Japan, what's a good way to cement words and stop having to look them up 100 times?
Ooh, I mean, well, Anki I think is pretty good, but it's really hard. And I do think that the best way of cementing it in your brain is like linked to an experience.
I agree. Yeah.
It's hard to sort of inorganically create that.
Yes.
Something that just needs to happen.
アウトプットはなかなか難しいですよね。はい。はい。そうですね。
そうですよ。
マスさん。Use them often, I would say. Force yourself to use them all the time. That's what I do. Yeah, I think I totally agree.
Yeah.
If you can create an experience, something I used to do is create a weird sentence or create a weird scenario, make up a story. I think one of my first goals in Japan was storytelling. My friends always said I was a horrible storyteller in English, so one of my goals was like, I'm going to be good at it in Japanese. So I think being able to talk about your past, things that are familiar. So a lot of times in my lessons, I try to get into your personal life because, you know, it's like, oh, how, like, you know, it's like, like how many students are in the class? Like if I ask some how many apples are on the table? How many apples are on the table? Who gives a crap? Okay. But if I say, where's your wife? Where's your wife right now? Like, how are your children? How's your daughter? How old is your daughter? How old is your daughter? Like that question is going to stand way more out in your mind and cement than any other random textbook type word would or sentence.
Yeah. Great.
All right. I think that's it. And大丈夫かな? Okay. Well, David, I'm gonna clock out too here.
No worries.
Got a Christmas party, you know.
Excellent. That sounds fun.
Yeah. But seriously, I've probably never said it officially, but I'm so grateful for just the way that
it makes me feel really good.
Seriously, you should, because I feel like I guarantee you I probably wouldn't be where I am Japanese wise without you. It was that much of an impact on me. Like just knowing, I think really back then, knowing this guy cares about me and my Japanese, and then like, you know, like just like somebody to follow, like somebody なんか日本語で言うとなんか背中を見るとかなんか背中を追うとか言うんだっけ。So having that 存在, having that you know type of person in my life was huge. And you know, helping me today, and we grew out of contact, you know, just because of natural life things, you know how it is. But you know, outside of stream and all that stuff, would always love to talk occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there was one point where we were just even on Facebook, it was like thousands of messages, I think. Which is crazy to think about. Yeah. So I love you, man, and thank you so much, and it was super fun.
Thanks. So, yeah, it's been fun. It's good to talk to you.
ありがとう。じゃあ、everyone say goodbye, and yeah. またね。
またね。
There you go. Well, thank you guys so much. It was super fun. Thank you very much, David. I love David. He's just been a big part of my life. Not so much in the recent years, but when I was really studying and everything, it was really, really big on me. So for any of you guys who are studying Japanese or studying English, まあ日本語であろうが英語であろうが私は手伝ってあげたいと思ってます。I want to help you. I want to guide you in the right direction. Just like David did for me. I want to be there for you. I want to encourage you. I want to answer those questions that nobody else can answer, or at least maybe nobody is around to answer. I'm there for you. If you want to support this channel, please subscribe. Share this video with your friends. Post it on Reddit or something for me, will you? The best language conversation of all time. Share, spread. That would be the biggest help for me. I don't need any money or anything like that. I just want to try to push the YouTube channel, try to make it bigger. Not bigger, but just more people know about it. Yeah. So thank you guys so much. That was a lot of fun. Arigato.